Hello, everyone. Hi. Thank you guys for hosting this. All of you out there that I know, it's a privilege to be able to do this. This is where the actual healing takes place, is in sharing this story and hopefully running a worthwhile workshop today. The material that I got today, just kind of as a heads up, is something that I took off of the CoDA.org website. It's called the 40 Questions. It was just recently approved, so I figured let's give it a shot, huh? Picking on questions 15 and 39 from that. I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to go ahead and try to bring up for us to look at. Can everyone see that? Give me a nod. Yeah, were you able to see this? Okay. Um, right. So, my name is Eric. I'm codependent once again, and this is my presentation for today, Dispelling Enmeshment and Getting Clarity Using Internal Boundaries. This idea of internal boundaries is something that comes up in the document um, that I found. I like to start everything that I do with the extended serenity prayer. This is something that's part of my own recovery and something that I say to myself on a daily basis. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace, hope, and never walking alone. Accepting the world as it is and not as I would have it, I surrender to a will that is greater than my own, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and inspire in others the same hopes and aspirations. Amen. So I guess good place to start is where I always start with these types of things is with my family of origin. Just basically my story. Yeah, and my family of origin. Um, I had was born to a mother and a father who were both most likely codependent. My father struggled with sharing emotions. He was a Vietnam veteran, and I was born shortly after his return home from Vietnam. He had been drafted. He, I think, part of that trauma was something that was passed down to me. He never liked to deal with his feelings. Didn't really know how to deal with his feelings, and still to this day kind of feels that the best way to deal with feelings is not to experience them, and not to become emotional. My mom was someone that would was a very loving person, and and wanted me to succeed in life, and so she valued hard work above everything else, and she kind of instilled in me she wanted to motivate me by kind of comparing me to others, I suppose. So one of my earliest memories was being told that a family friend had been born a couple days before me could tie his shoes, so why can't I tie my shoes? And that was kind of like the way that she motivated me. And so I naturally picked up on these behaviors, right, where I would begin to compare myself to others constantly. And that was something that I picked up on my whole life. And so I constantly was searching for women to validate me. And this was something that I spent my life trying to do. I wound up getting married very, very young. Wound up meeting my future ex-wife when I was 19. Um, we were married within 3 years. I was married by the time I was 22 years old. And I was constantly seeking this person's approval. I made this person my higher power and sought validation through this person, um, which of course she was not able to give me. I never really felt like I was good enough. Um, just as I had done with my mother, I sought to comply with whatever my mother or whatever my future ex-wife would want. Um, and when I wouldn't get what I wanted from them, I would tend to avoid. And so my whole life is all those when I first got into CoDA, the list of compliance characteristics and avoidance characteristics. Man, I just was like hitting on every one of those. So I thought that I needed women to validate my sense of self-worth. I never felt that I was as good as other men. And I always thought that my future, that the person that I'd married uh, would um, would choose other men over me, and eventually that wound up becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. Um, and again, just continuing those old behaviors that I learned as a child became something that I did regularly throughout my life. Uh, my codependency did not just affect my relationships, however. It also affected my work and still does. I get a great deal of my sense of self-worth from work. I'm a perfectionist though, and I never live up to the perfection that I'm seeking. And so these are the types of things that I deal with on a regular basis, is looking for validation, um, and looking for self-worth from external sources rather than finding it within myself. And so this has been part of my recovery journey, is really working on that, and also trying to and also seeking out therapy as well. Um, as a result of constantly seeking approval from others, I'm I have the ability to fall into enmeshed relationships very quickly or very easily. I In being enmeshed, of course, I strongly associate myself with how others perceive me. I tend to ride the emotional roller coasters of those that I'm closest to. I have a hard time discerning where I stop and where others begin. Um, and this is all done uh, so that I'll feel accepted by people. That's usually what I'm seeking to do um, in my relationships. And so, how I wound up in CoDA then was in I wound up getting separated from my wife of let's see, we'd been together from 98 to 2020, so or from 96 to 2020, so for 24, almost 25 years. We had been together and we got separated in August of 2020. And in April of 2021, when I'd hit a low point, I'd hit my rock bottom, just in terms of depression. After the separation and subsequent divorce, I felt pretty low about myself. Um, I didn't really know who I was. I'd associated myself with that person that I had been with all those years. And yeah, and so at the point of our breakup, I just hit an all-time low. Um, I became very depressed, had suicidal ideations, and I had happened to move into a house, um, strangely enough, rented a room in a house because that was all I could afford at the time. And one of the people that lived in that house was actually a member of CoDA and a member of the Thursday night group that I would become a part of, and that would subsequently basically save my life. So in April 22nd of 2021, I had my first CoDA meeting. It was on Zoom, just like this one. And there I found people that I realized that I wasn't alone and I was accepted, and I was scared to death to go to that meeting. I'd never been in a 12-step meeting before. Um, and Yeah, and that was the turning point in my life. And I was able to turn my life around, which I might get into here in a few more minutes. But for now, I at that time I was working on finishing a degree, a higher education degree, and I was able to finish that as a result of CoDA, as a result of a sponsor that worked very closely with me, and and work on issues of self-worth. And we went through the 12 steps together, um, and it was life changing. I now have a full-time job. Um, I'm in a relationship with a human being that's pretty wonderful. Um, we're um, we're working on building an honest and open, equitable, loving, and healthy relationship. Um, it's it's been a lot of work, um, but it's been worth it. She's not a member of CoDA, but she understands my codependency and has been supportive of things that I need to talk about and work out with her. There's still challenges. I'm very much, like I said earlier, I have a tendency to become enmeshed, to make other people's feelings my own. And something that I've realized in this relationship is that when I do that, I keep that person, this person that I'm in this relationship with, I keep her from being able to fully express herself and feel her feelings because she feels the need then to take care of my response to her feelings. So um and when I first got into code, I didn't even know what my emotions were, and or what it was that I was feeling. And through work with my sponsor, I was able to identify my feelings and work through those feelings. um but now, in doing that, I have to be able to separate, to realize where this other person ends and where I begin, so that I can fully allow her to express her feelings that she might be feeling, based on something that I did even, and to not take that personal and to hear her out. And that's been very, very difficult. But the fact of the matter is that we built a vocabulary around some of these issues, and we've worked together very, very closely, um, on developing this relationship that's based on honest communication and open communication. Um, And so I've even had thoughts, right, recently about, am I still codependent because of how I've been able to deal with stuff in this relationship? And of course, the answer is a glaring and obvious yes. I am still very much codependent. It's not something that you're ever completed with, and that's something that I've been thinking a lot about, and where am I at now in my recovery, and trying to reflect upon that. So I'll be speaking a little bit about that today, um, as we'll see. Uh, but this whole idea of enmeshment, which is something that I deal with, and that's on the forefront of my mind. So that's what I'm going to be speaking about today. Um, I found this codependent mantra, kind of a joke a little bit, but something that I do feel like I'm confronted with, that I can easily fall into, is this idea of losing myself to another person. Um, and so this mantra of "I'm nothing without you" is, I find this very helpful to think about. That is this a thought that I have? Is this a feeling that I feel developing? And and that's kind of how I kind of gauge myself in this relationship. Um, and how I work on processing some of this um, stuff that I'm going through currently, and where I'm at now in my journey. And so again, how I'm dealing with these questions, and how I kind of framed this talk for today, comes from the 40 questions. This is literature. This is taken straight from the CoDA website. Um, This is new literature that's just recently been approved. There's a little link right here. If anyone's interested in following this link, I'll click on it real quick just so everyone can see it. This is where it comes from, and clicking on this right here will take you to them. Um, if you should happen to want to look at that today, or in the future, I'll be going through questions 15 and 39, I believe. There's various questions that are in that, and I thought that perhaps, as we go through this, we can kind of open it up for sharing. If anyone has any thoughts about these questions and anything that gets read or brought up, but I'll leave that completely up to all of you, on what you feel like sharing and who feels like sharing along the way. So this is on page 6 of the document, question 15. It asks us to begin by reading pages 112 and 113 in the Blue Book, um, where it deals with this idea of internal boundaries. And so this quote that I wound up pulling out of that portion of the reading, pages 112 to 113, it says, Our internal boundaries define and contain the unique personal characteristics of our thoughts, feelings, opinions, behaviors, beliefs, and spirituality. Boundaries help us recognize, honor, and respect our individual wants, needs, and desires. They help us define our separateness and give us safety in our most intimate communications with others. And this just really jumps out at me based on everything that I was just telling you about my story and about where I'm at in my recovery. This idea of establishing separateness. Um, this is what gives us safety. And that's a really an amazing idea to me, I guess. Um, Even just addressing what it is that I want or need or desire in a relationship or just anything in life has been ungodly difficult for me. Just to even think about in terms of what it is that Eric wants, um, or even being able to say that I desire something, um, and being able to recognize that first of all is a huge thing. And so really trying to spend some time to hone in on that and think about that. And then also giving honor and respect to those wants and needs and desires is huge. And so this isn't typically the way that I think of boundaries. Typically the way that I think of boundaries is in the negative, right? That you're taking something away. Like I need to stop doing this, or I need to ask people to stop doing something. Um, but in fact, boundaries can actually be a positive, a gain, actually looking at what it is that you want and need and desire. And I thought that that was really, really big. I don't know about all of you, but for me, whenever I am drill sergeanting myself into something, right? Of saying, don't do this, or it's bad that you do that. Um, it's hard for me to move forward on anything. But viewing things in the positive or giving power to myself, basically, to figuring out what it is that I actually want, um, is huge to me. And this is where I feel like I'm finding myself um, for the first time. Again, this idea of the unique personal characteristics of my thoughts and my feelings and my opinions, my spirituality. Um, yeah, and so I think that this is a really cool way to think of boundaries and something that's really, really super empowering. Um, and it's just been there in the blue book the whole time. But reading about it in this context, I don't know, it was different and it opened ideas for me. And so in this document, they have these little stepping stones on the path. There's all these different little pieces of advice that they give. And and so this is just something from the document. It says it is important to develop healthy communication boundaries in all our personal interactions. And so that sounds daunting, right? That sounds kind of, at least for someone like me, um, that sounds exhausting as hell. Actually, I'll be honest. To develop healthy communication boundaries in all our personal interactions. Like, can I take take some time off here and there? Um, but this I thought was also helpful. It says all of us suffer from this disease, and so disease spelled, the way that it's spelled here is, suggesting that there's a lack of ease, right? That we're experiencing. And then that it has to do with this perception, right? That this is just a perception of not knowing where I end and others begin. And that everyone suffers from this to some degree. We all have stuff. When we change our inner talk and outer talk from you statements to I statements, and we say things like I noticed and I feel and I need. So this is, I guess, how you know I begin to develop this idea of what my needs are and what my wants are and my desires, to actually start thinking about and using this inner dialogue constantly in terms of I statements, has been helpful to that. It's something that I continually need to do. These I statements is an effective skill, and this is where I got the name for the talk, because this is something that I'm really focusing on a lot lately. These I statements are an effective skill which brings clarity, dispels enmeshment, and sets boundaries, so we can more easily identify what is our stuff and what is another person's stuff. And this always felt very, very cold to me. Um, prior to uh, working recovery and working and talking with people in recovery and going to meetings and just being a part of CoDA. Um, this whole idea of figuring out that that claiming like, well, that's your stuff and this is my stuff, but actually this way of talking and this way of interacting has been extremely helpful in this current relationship that I'm in, and I want very badly for this relationship to work. This is someone I care about deeply, and um and there's actually a lot of compassion, just in the sense that it becomes easier for me to listen to this person when I'm able to just focus on what's my stuff and what's her stuff. And when it's her stuff, I can listen compassionately and not take things personally, not feeling the need to defend. I can shut down my internal dialogue when she's speaking, and fully be present for her with what she's experiencing and what she's feeling. Um, and then again, I can center myself more on what it is that I need and think about what it is that I need, as something that's separate. And so this has been huge. And so using these I statements, thinking about this, bringing clarity, this is, at least to me, how I see it as dispelling enmeshment and setting boundaries. So there's this question of what is self-containment? And so if we go back a couple slides here, mm, self-containment comes from where was it? Um, our internal boundaries define and contain the unique personal characteristics of our thoughts. And so that's what at least I thought anyway, what self-containment is getting to. And so I'd like to open up this question to the group. If anybody has any thoughts on this that they would like to share. But I know for me, I can just answer this right off the bat. For me, I have a response here that I can share with you first. To me, self-containment is realizing that I am responsible for my side of the street. I am not responsible for how anyone else feels. This is what's out of my control. The only thing I can control is my own feelings, thoughts, and actions. It is my responsibility then to articulate my feelings and thoughts to those I trust and are close to me with I statements, and also to act with integrity where my feelings are in line with my behaviors. And um, and so that's what I was getting out of self-containment. Again, if there's anybody out there that would like to possibly share what they might be, I can close this down here for a second, maybe. Um, if anyone, yeah, I just really like that whole thing that you said about taking time. Uh, oh, I forgot now what it was that you had said. Sorry, I got distracted by something. Yeah, but this, uh, yeah, it's difficult to figure out where it is that I begin, and that feeling of panic. That's what I'm getting at. Sorry about that. Yeah, I do. I get a tremendous feeling of panic that will overtake me as well. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Um, yeah, feeling a little panicked right now, actually, and trying to respond to that. That was awesome. Thank you. Yeah, definitely taking a second just to stop before we speak is huge. Definitely. Can't agree more. Yeah, I remember there's someone in the Thursday night meeting that I go to, also in a Monday night meeting that I go to, very wise member of CoDA who's always saying that uh you know, to when you're a passive person, being assertive seems aggressive. And so when you're a codependent, I'm guessing self-containment feels selfish at first. I feel like that's something that goes in line with that, right? And so that whole idea of quit taking it personally can seem like you're being selfish, right? At least that's the way that I saw it. Yeah, but this idea of self-containment is actually a way to be more present for other human beings, is something, um, yeah, that really takes a lot of reminding and work. Definitely, that's a beautiful point. Yeah, I got unenmeshed. That's a really good question. I guess just through the need to it just was toxic. It was time for it to end, and it just became very, very obvious. And so it was just a brutal tearing away, and ripping apart. Um, and and then even after it was ripped apart, there was still a long process of trying to figure out who the hell I was. And that goes right into the second part of the question of when did I realize I was ready to date, was when I started to realize who I was, and realizing I can remember having a conversation with my therapist actually, and my sponsor, in the same week, about this, of going through what it was that I wanted and what it was that I needed. And I really felt the need to feel loved again by someone, and to love someone. I felt like I had a lot of love to give, and I was ready to express that, and I wanted to give a shot at it being healthy. It's been messy. Um, I don't always do a good job of stuff. I make a lot of mistakes. But like my sponsor said, it's one thing to sit around and talk about healthy and loving relationships, and then it's another thing to actually walk the walk. And and so we don't actually learn how to become less codependent by just talking about it. We actually have to be engaged in relationship with people. That was one of the biggest lessons that I've learned probably in the past 3 years. Yeah. Yeah. Journaling and spending a lot of time thinking and reflecting, self reflection, is huge. That's a really good point. Journaling is probably one of the most powerful tools that I've used and that I've found. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. Thank you. That's a really good question. I used to be fully involved in keeping in contact with ex-partners, and that's something that just recently now I've not done. I basically have stopped all contact with people from my past. Basically because it was getting in the way of what I had with the person that I'm now with, and trying to make them a priority. Um, only in that there's still that feeling of connection, and I can get pulled in too many directions. It can get confusing to me. I'm just not that good at this yet, in order to be able to handle that. And so for kind of like a means for me, just so I don't really have a philosophy to answer that part of the question. But currently, I am no longer in contact with people from my past, because it's just made things simpler for me. And I did it for myself. I did it as a means of self-care, and just trying to give this human being that I'm in relationship with now, um, my full and undivided attention, and both of us seeking to make each other the priority right now in our relationship anyway, building this hopefully healthy and loving relationship together. Yeah. Um, I think I haven't had a whole lot of experience with this myself. Maybe there's someone else in this vast conglomerate of beautiful individuals out there that has better advice. But I feel like if you're interacting with someone who's threatening, you have every right to walk away from that and not engage with that, would be the first thing that comes to my mind. I haven't had a whole lot of experiences with people that I fear in terms of them being a threat to me. Um, I have made the mistake with the person that I was once married to, who can be somewhat threatening, where I've engaged with that person too much. Not in a physically threatening way, but definitely in an emotionally threatening way. Um, and again, I had to remove myself completely from that person. Yeah. I was planning on stopping for questions for these discussion questions, but everyone is so good at sharing. I think what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to run through quite a few of these, and then we'll just kind of open it up for shares. Maybe I'll do this for like 20 more minutes, and then we can open it up for sharing for like the last 10 or so, or maybe 15. We'll see how fast I can get through this. But one of the questions that gets asked then is, what is emotional safety? This is again coming from the documents of the 40 questions. And again, for me, emotional safety, like what was just talked about with the question about threatening, someone who you find threatening, emotional safety to me is being centered on my own values and not having my self-worth dependent on the evaluation of others' feelings of me. Depending on others for my self-worth, as what was brought up in one of the shares earlier as well, makes me act in ways that seek approval instead of acting with authenticity about who I am. And, I will never know who I am if I'm not acting with authenticity. My feelings about myself need to be based on my own values and not on the expectations of others. And this really reminds me, I think it was Debbie that was talking about this, right? Um, this idea of when you look towards others, you kind of lose sight of yourself, and this grounding oneself, finding self-worth within myself and not from others. This to me is what emotional safety is. Because it's so easy. My tendencies gravitate so much towards giving away myself. And that's where my safety, I think, relies the most. And so then the follow-up question is, how can I ensure that my self-worth is not diminished by another person's words or behaviors? Um, and this, I think, is the best thing that I've ever learned, is that accepting what another person thinks and feels is about them, right? How I think and how I feel is about me, and how others think and feel is about them. And that's that whole notion of separation. That's where that emotional safety comes from. I'm responsible for how I feel. This is just what you were saying, Michael. I'm responsible for how I feel about myself and what I allow to determine how I feel about myself. Yeah. And so that whole idea of I allow, I'm in control of what I allow, um, as external noise, right? And then this is the advice that follows. This is the advice from the 40 questions document. Do not internalize others' words, messages, or actions until you can determine if any of it is hurtful or not. If it is not loving, um, if it is loving, you can bring it into your heart. And yeah, this really resonates with what was brought up earlier as well in one of the shares. Um, that God stop, right? That stopping and thinking before we act and feel and think and talk and what we tell ourselves. This whole idea of internalizing, and man, did I screw this up in my marriage, my very long marriage. I totally internalized every word and message and action. Um, and a lot of it wound up, especially at the end, wound up being very hurtful. So I think that this is just incredible advice. Not always easy to do, but man, just to something to write down and just to keep in mind. And so this is something that the document asks us to memorize. So if you have pen and paper, I recommend anyway, that these 5 internal boundaries, it's also in the document too. The link is on the PowerPoint. I can put any of this in the chat if anybody wants me to. But if you memorizing these 5 internal boundaries is what they say to do. Um, just to say this, right? I know where you stop, or where I stop and you begin, just as a form of affirmation, just to say to myself, I know where I stop and you begin. I know what is my business and what is none of my business. I know the difference between my emotions and others' emotions. I recognize what is and what is not my responsibility. And I'm aware of what is and what is not comfortable or safe for me. Um, And so then it goes on to ask us what we feel about these, or what comes up for you when you hear these boundaries. And for me, these are the boundaries that I want in this person that I'm in a relationship with currently. Number 5 is the only one that seems to really come natural for me. I struggle with 3 and 4, and I'll bring these back up here in a second. Um, and I am most likely able to deny my most intimate person an opportunity to feel her feelings by not following these boundaries here. And I put undue stress on myself with unreal expectations upon myself. And so, again, how this relates to these boundaries. 3 and 4, I know the difference between my emotions and others' emotions. That's where I make my partner feel probably like she's not being heard. I can struggle with that by relating her emotions to my emotional state, and I'm instantly feeling something. And I recognize what is and what is not my responsibility. I have a really difficult time with that. Just as Michael was sharing before we got started again, um, lacking the ability to understand what is my responsibility at all times is something that I struggle with. And so that's where this comes into putting undue stress on myself with unreal expectations, is I expect myself to be able to fix people's problems, right? Especially people that I care about. And I believe that that was one of the first shares, that whole idea of I think it was the second share, getting involved in how people in their drama, right? And this does put unreal expectations on ourselves. So how do I feel in this moment, or when I was going through this, I guess is probably more accurate. And at that time, I was worried that I was not able to put these boundaries into place, those 5 internal boundaries, and worried even that if I, and this was brought up as well in the shares earlier, that I am able to enact these boundaries, that I'll lose people, right? When you're in relationship with someone, I don't know about all of you, but I become fearful, that fear of abandonment, that I'll lose that person. And then what happens as a result is I wind up abandoning myself. Um, and some this goes back to one of the questions that was asked, I believe, by how did I know when I was ready for a relationship? When I wasn't afraid of being alone anymore. And but I still do fear. I spent a lot of time alone. I spent a lot of time alone in COVID. Um, and so I was very, very isolated. So thank goodness for Zoom, and thank goodness for that Thursday night meeting. Um, but yeah, so that's what I was initially feeling when I was going through this. Just as honest as I can be about it, was I was worried that I wouldn't be able to put these boundaries into place, and I actually have been since putting this together 2 weeks ago. Um, little bits by little bits, but it's still walking the path. And but still dealing with that fear of losing who I'm most intimate with. Um, and then from time to time, I can still feel ashamed about my codependency, and that this is a struggle for me, right? And so the document, this 40 questions document, advises us to visualize ways that we can protect ourselves. So visualizing ourselves saying these to other people, specifically people that are closest to me, right? This person that I am in this relationship with, I do practice saying these things to her, and it has helped. And then actually saying them, just being honest with, this is what I'm going through, this is what I read. But the visualization part really, really does help. Stating these boundaries silently to yourself when you are fearful or communicating with an unsafe person. So again, that advice I was looking for on how to deal with an unsafe person or someone that you find threatening. Um, yeah, this process of visualization. Um, well, synchronicity, right? Um, and then writing your insights from these visualizations in a journal. Journaling is always key, right? I kind of want to stop for questions, but we'll keep going. And so moving on from question 15 then to 39, am I ever recovered? This is question 39. Am I ever recovered from codependency? And so that was something that I brought up earlier. And then what is a codependent slip? This idea of being ashamed of our codependency is something that I know that I'm not alone with. So am I ever recovered from codependency? This comes from page 116 in the Blue Book. We can become very disappointed if we believe we can stop all our codependent behaviors. Program reminds us to show up, work our recovery process, and turn the results over to God. Man, step 3, right? Over and over again, always coming up. Turn the results over to God. When we do this and release perfectionism, we can experience the hope and miracles of recovery. And actually, this is step 5, not step 3, turning the results over to God, or step 7, I believe, right? Experience the hope and miracles of recovery, a life progressively filled with serenity, acceptance, and love. And I love this idea of a life progressively filled with serenity, acceptance, and love. Um, it's a process, right? It's a journey, not a destination. And then from page 117 of What is a Codependent Slip, we've also found it helpful to avoid shaming or punishing ourselves for our slips, remembering that shame is a large part of codependence. We find only fuel for the fire when we add self-shaming and punishment to our mistakes. Forgiveness, love, and perseverance from our self-parent are the keys to working with codependent slips. And so this is the part, I think that this is as close as we get um, to being recovered, right? Is realizing, first of all, being accountable, which I'll get into here in a moment, being accountable, and then also being kind with oneself and not shaming oneself based on what we've learned, and just continually moving forward in our recovery. So have you seen codependent patterns repeating over and over as a common thread in relationships? For me, it's been a lot less, and I've seen some improvement. I still worry from time to time about being rejected or neglected emotionally. That's never going to go away, probably. But hopefully it's getting better. I know that this is a fear based on a narrative that I tell myself, right? Either looking back to the past or focusing on the future. And man, something that has helped me is just getting present as I possibly can be, looking at this person that I'm with and just enjoying time with her in the present rather than fearing the future or thinking about either one of our pasts. That's something that I really, really have to focus on. Because it is. Fear is based on what's happened in the past and looking at the future. I very rarely feel fear in the moment, right? Turning my mind toward what I have right now. And then this idea of humility, um, healthier relationships with ourself. This is referring to step 4 and 5, which is what the 40 questions are supposed to help with. And I just said, since completing steps 4 and 5, I've learned that my humility means asking for help from others, and also from my higher power. So asking for help from and relying on my higher power. This was mentioned in one of the earlier shares. I cannot overcome my habitual ways of thinking and acting on my own. I need to turn my fears about being rejected and neglected over to my higher power. I'm worthy of self-love and respect for myself, first and foremost from myself, and others, but first and foremost for myself. And it still requires work within my program. And then just this idea of being right sized. This is something that the questions ask about, this document brings up. And for me, right sized has to do with humility. Once again, not comparing myself to others, right? Like I'm smaller than some people or better than other people. And being right sized is that Goldilocks part, right? Um, this begins with accepting the role of my higher power in my life. The voice in my head or my inner critic or inner terrorist has absolutely no power except for the power that I give it. And so turning my life and will and this desire of perfection over to God or my higher power, admitting that I cannot carry the weight of all my fears, concerns, and hopes and desires on my own, helps me find my right size. And this is what it means to me to be humble. And so again, accountability in 49 through 52, recovery is completed. Even though it is never over, becoming accountable for my actions becomes more important and more difficult with the more I learn and come to understand everything goes deeper and requires even greater levels of vulnerability and trust in the program and in my program of recovery. So always this relationship has been tough because I thought that I had done a lot in codependency. I thought that I had made a lot of ground, and I'd recovered a lot, but there's still more to do, and just new levels and new layers of being in this relationship with someone. These new layers and new levels of vulnerability have awoken in me that I need to that I need to that I need to address. There's always something to work on. and realizing that there's a lot of codependency that still needs to be overcome. And then from the last three paragraphs on page 52, we realize that only through God's grace have we come this far. I'm very grateful for my recovery program. My life is infinitely better than what it was 3 years ago. I still have a long way to go. But I have to be compassionate with myself, and I learn to love myself more deeply. And this in turn allows me to love others more fully and honestly. And no matter how much I see myself as failing or not living up to the expectations that I have for myself, especially in my recovery program, I'm still walking the path. And that's what needs to happen every day for my recovery to work for me completely. And so, in closing, I just like this four-step prayer. In this moment, I'm willing to see myself as I truly am, a growing, unfolding spiritual being resting in the hands of God. I can separate myself from what I've done, knowing that the real me is emerging, loving, joyful, and whole. And in the step 5 prayer, in this moment, I will acknowledge myself for doing what is most difficult for me. I will rest in the accepting presence of my higher power. I know I've deepened my commitment to the journey of recovery by opening myself and my heart to a fellow human being, and to all of you. And so thank you for all of that and allowing me this opportunity.